Hello my friends, Craig from Arms and Armor, and today we're going to look at a piece that I've just finished up. It's a custom piece done to the spec for the customer, and this is what we're going to call a Coustel. Now, you have probably heard multiple generations of that name as far as how to pronounce it, how to spell it. Just to give you a clue, these are all ways that it is presented in text. So you can see that it is not necessarily a very defined thing. When we look at this, it illustrates one of the things that we often will talk about in our blog posts about what this was called in a particular period for any type of thing. Now, this is going to be a large dagger, i.e. knife, almost short sword kind of piece. It's, as you can see, a pretty hefty little nice piece. Very tapered blade, very sharp, designed for combat. It is very much a weapon to be used against other human beings. In the period, while they describe this as a Coustel, that's the way I'm going to pronounce it, just because me trying to pronounce foreign language names and terms it'll just be a butchery. But what we're going to talk about is the fact that this is probably referencing it as a knife, okay? You know, we all get into these ideas of like, what was this called? What was that called? What does this specifically mean? Where we get probably the better description of this is in Archaeology of Weapons from Ewart Oakeshott. He describes it in several text pieces, but each one of those texts kind of starts out and is describing it as a knife or dagger. The earliest one that he has listed is right at the beginning of the 13th century, and when you translate it, it's the King of Scotland basically saying, this is how his men should be armed. He says, let him have a horse, a mail shirt, an iron helm, and a knife called a dagger. That's literally what it would translate to. We get some other references to it. Again, these are all Latin phrases or medieval Latin / French type phrases that are being quoted by Ewart in the Archaeology of Weapons. And it says, if you come across a bad man at night who is armed with a knife and is trying to do harm or kill somebody, you killing them won't cause you any problems. You won't have any legal issues if they are these cutlers, as they're starting to be called. Now, they actually use the term cutler, which we've been referencing a lot as the person who finishes a sword, but in this text, it's talking about it in a very derogatory way, so these are almost certainly the way humans do, taking that term and applying it to those that are maybe less than desirables. And you're creating a nickname or a slang term for a brigand or a thief or a highwayman or a robber. So they're calling them cutlers, and that's where we get this Coustel. There's also Cousteliers, who are, again, foot soldiers, kind of, individuals fighting in armies, probably more as irregular troops than official army type troops. So we see all these things coming together, kind of feeding that term. What is actually referenced by these is daggers, right? In one section, it does describe what a Coustel should be, and it talks about it being a slender blade with an extremely sharp point and can cut you from the point to the guard. It's a weapon to be used in hand-to-hand combat. These are probably very similar to the types of things we're seeing illustrated in the Majorowski Bible. How does that kind of equate? Some of those are very short daggers, but again, they are probably all referencing dagger, not necessarily a dagger of this length or that length, or a dagger of this type or that type. When they do those kind of things, like in inventories, they break them down a little differently. They'll say, these are cutting knives, these are stabbing knives, these are carving knives. They don't get them all together and differentiate by hilt type or blade length or any of those things. Sometimes they'll say large or small. Another term that's difficult to try to translate into, the modern concepts we have of how we define weapons would be misrecord. Some of the references to that are in the same phrasings that this is referenced, and they'll say, like, in an inventory there's 2 swords and 2 small misrecords. That's all it says, which probably means 2 small knives of some sort. They don't differentiate in that text whether they're by knives on a scabbard or are fighting daggers that go along with, or are almost short swords. We don't know. So that's one reason why when you start defining these things today and we talk about them, or people put names on them when they're selling them on websites like we do, sometimes it gets a little dicey because we don't actually have a way of absolutely saying this is this with the references we have from the period. Now, to this piece, it's done up custom for a customer. It's got, as we described, that very nice tapered blade coming along with a fuller down the center. It's got a small arched guard and a wheel pommel that are all set with a pommel nut on a dark brown leather grip. And it feels great in the hand. This weighs just over 2 pounds. The grip's about 4 1/8 inches, but this just whips through the air really nicely. The cog is just under 2 inches. For 2 pounds, or slightly over 2 pounds, it seems like that's kind of far back, but it does play very well in the hand because the customer's requested a reinforced tip. So I'm carrying a little bit more weight out in the tip of this blade than I would normally for a blade in period. So that helps take that cog out, and it really gives it a wonderful feel in the hand. In discussions with the customer, I was talking about it, it feels very much like a gladius kind of feels like. So it is a hand-to-hand combat weapon of exceptional agility. This would stab very well, I think, through a lot of stuff. It's also very sharp. One of the references we do have is, that it could cut very easily from the tip to the guard. So these were weapons designed for a very exceptional kind of action. This overall is about 26 1/4 inches or so, and the blade came out just over 19 1/2 from the guard to the tip. The guard width is about 6 1/4 inches. So you can see it almost looks very swordy, but it's probably not big enough that most people would want to call it a sword. Probably be something that would be very popular, for somebody on the campaign or out in the wilderness running around, that it's going to be very effective as a weapon to use, as chopping things, slicing things, but it's also not going to be too heavy or hard to carry around. We've done a hard scabbard for it with some detail on the shape, just to make it look kind of nice and make it kind of a whole set piece here. And this piece is, it's wood with leather over the scabbard and stuff, and it holds the sword very nicely in the hand. So when we pull this out, it's real smooth, great action. It's a interesting piece. It was kind of a fun experiment to do. As you get to see these things, we talk about them all the time. It's a kind of a weapon that gets discussed a lot by reenactors and historians because of that term, but that term may well just mean dagger. So when we try and delve out exactly what was being done in period and what is happening with these people, it's good to keep in mind that, one, soldiers and people who are using things on an everyday basis will constantly give nicknames and call things, use them to name other things. So if you're a particular type of soldier fighting a particular weapon, you might get called by that weapon. So that's where we get Coustel and things like that coming into the language, is that they were armed with this type of weapon. The result is that it makes it more difficult for us today when we want to write out and be very specific about something, but that's our problem, not theirs in a sense. When we go back and we look at the text and we really dig into what the things they had and how they used them, you can learn those things. You can figure them out if we get our modern minds out of the way and look at things with the reality of all the aspects of being human in a combat situation give you when you look at weapons. Hope you found this interesting. Hope you like this piece. I'm sure the customer's gonna like it. He's very excited to get it. We're gonna get it off to him today. And I hope you guys have a wonderful day.